bro, I don't want to talk to you ever, because you weird as hell and you shout at me in public. So, hi, my name is Inshalati. Welcome to also the book club. So today we've got 3 books that I want to talk about. Funny enough, I would consider this a generational run of really, really strange books that I've never planned to read, but I'm really glad I did because they're very different. They're very weird plots and they do different things in different ways. And that's why I wanted to talk about them. Initially, I wanted to talk about the books that I'm planning to read for the month of... What month is this? May. And so capitalism took place and I was like, okay, so we're going to have to put that on pause for a second. I'll probably do what I'm planning to read for the month of June because I need to figure out some logistics in terms of like how I'm getting through all the books that I'm getting through. So for now, I figured, let me talk about the books that I have read this past week. I've read like 3.5 books. And when I say half, I'm like in the middle of the last one. So the 4th book. So I won't really talk about that one. But I think it's an interesting book because it's about like espionage. It's about spies. It's about like Russian spies in America. And I'm like, yes. Let's see how they write those kinds of characters. And that's why I'm reading that book. And plus the cover is so bright. It's like orange. It's called Imposter Syndrome, but I think I'll talk about it next time. I won't talk about it this time. So I think because of my little situation in terms of like what's going on with the reading apps that I'm using, I will most likely have to do weekly reading updates at this point. I'll come and tell you about all the books that I really enjoy reading and yeah. And because of how things are set up, I'm probably going to be talking about really, really strange plot stories. It won't be your standard romance. We might get a little bit of thriller because I'll always find a way to come here and talk about thriller novels because those are my babies. I'm thinking of also getting into like autobiographies, but I don't know what autobiographies to read about. There's no interesting people that I'm like interested in knowing their stories. You would think like with all the phenomenal people in the world, there are people's books I'd like to read. No. But I want to read an autobiography just to get a feel for how that is generally structured and see if that's my kind of take on like a narrative structure about a human being, because all these books that I read are about humans. So unless I read about fays and stuff, I should go back to fantasy. Anyway, all of this is just an extra rant about absolutely nothing. We're going to be talking about 3 books that I've read this past week, and they're all different. I don't even know the genres of some of these books because I don't really need to know a genre in order for me to go into it. And so I gave these 3 books a try, and if this is something you'd be interested in doing or reading too, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, share the video with people who read, share the video with your friends, share the video with everybody so that people can get into reading if they're not into reading. So the first book we're going to be talking about is Goodbye Vitamin. So Goodbye Vitamin is basically a story about a girl. Her name is Ruth, or rather a lady named Ruth whose father is been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, which is a neurodegenerative illness, which basically means the cells in your brain are like losing steam. So you start losing your memories, you start losing your behavioral patterns, and you start to essentially lose yourself. The story basically takes part in 3 parts, and those 3 parts are intertwined with one another. So we're not doing a part 1, part 2, part 3, but rather a story 1, story 2, story 3, then chapter 4, story 1, again like that. So basically the story is following Ruth moving back home to look after her father who lives with his wife, being Ruth's mother, and she just wants to be there to help her father deal with this new illness that he's recently been diagnosed with. In these parts of the book where we talk about Ruth moving in with her father, you see the effects of the Alzheimer's on the family. You see how she's coping and how the mom is also coping with this disease that is affecting their loved one. We watch how Ruth is essentially like navigating this new way of living with this man that she's held to such high esteem over the years, and watching him lose himself. He often like locks himself in his study because he used to be a history professor, and I think what the book is implying is that he's trying to read up on all the things that he can read up, just to like store stuff into his brain that is literally like destroying all the memories he has of himself, whilst his family lives on the outside trying to coax him out of that study. And they do different things like get his old students together, and they allow him to essentially continue to teach them, even though it's not a real class with no credits, just to give this man that they love and they revered something to do during a time where he has lost so much. Because we all know that one's memories are their identity and who they are. So losing that side of himself, we watch all these people around him trying to essentially make life the most comfortable for him. Also, we watch how in this part of the story, Ruth and Ruth's mom are like reading up on these really random medical facts in order to kind of like slow down the deterioration of this man's mind. So they talk about all the food that has all this aluminium that could be like breaking down this man's brain. So they stop eating cooked food because most of the food is being cooked in aluminium pots and stuff like that. They start eating like different kinds of food. I think there's a point where she's looking into finding jellyfish because she's heard that jellyfish have really great memory retention. I guess it's retention supplements and nutrients in them. So we follow how this disease that is affecting one man is essentially affecting every person in that man's social group, right? His family, the people he teaches and stuff like that. So that was like the first part of the story. I think I enjoyed that part more because that was the more narrative part of the story, where we're dealing with an actual story of life with the disease and how everybody's life and the events around those lives are impacting these people. Another part of the story that we're watching and exploring is the fact that the reason why Ruth can essentially upend her entire life and move back home is because she recently broke up with her boyfriend. And in the second part of the story, we're essentially watching this lady navigate her life post the breakup, trying to figure out what actually happened. There's even a scene where she is talking about the things you kind of notice when your partner is essentially departnering from you. Like sometimes in a relationship, the thing that connects you are the things that connect you, like your shared memories, your shared experiences. And the moment her partner starts not remembering things that she found were fond memories for the both of them, where they were both involved, she's like, oh, hell no. I should have seen that that was one of the signs that he's stopped caring about us as a unit enough so to like retain those memories of us. She also talks about how her life has now completely changed because of this breakup. She's finding herself thinking about her partner, because when you are in a relationship, you stop necessarily thinking about yourself as an individual. You start coupling up your life with your partner, even in your mind. So she talks about that experience on her. And we also, coupled with themes of what's happening in the first part, we watch Ruth essentially begin a relationship with one of her dad's students, and he's of age. He's of age. Why am I making it seem like he's like the right age? He's like Ruth's age. He's like an assistant. Why am I going nuts trying to over-explain this? But basically what I'm trying to say is that Ruth's new boyfriend is just like a graduate assistant of the professor. So he's like in his late 30s, similar to how Ruth is also in her late 30s. And they come together because they try to help the dad. They try to help the dad with his Alzheimer's disease. And so they essentially form a bond. and we also explore that little love interest situation. Another part of the story that is explored is like this notebook that the dad gave Ruth for Christmas. And in this notebook, the dad used to write all the like quirky little questions Ruth used to ask him, like when she was small. It was a strange, unnecessary way to introduce some emotional connection between Ruth and the dad she grew up with, right? So I think that was a bit. I think it served to be an emotional anchor to the story, but I was like, I don't need this. This is a waste of my time. And I don't know. There's just some things that I think we don't need to do. We don't need to do in stories just to capture an emotional reaction from your audience. And I think that's what they did in this particular part of the story. I wasn't a fan at all, but what can we say? So, thoughts about the story. The story is like, you see how I'm telling you that this is like different parts. The crazy thing was that this book was written like journal entries. And the issue with like having a journal entry type of book setup is that the narrative structure is all over the place. People don't speak in a linear story in journal entries. And I think at some points it seemed very, very disjointed, and I was not a fan of that, right? Because there was a point where they give you dates and stuff, and I was listening to it. So I was like, I don't like what I'm hearing, because I can't remember what year we're dealing with. So we're moving between January and June, February and July, but like from different years, because I was like, wait, there's no ways this could have happened all in 1 year. And because I wasn't like paying attention at like the times when they would like release a date, I was like, I got lost. And because I don't have the time to like sit down and go back into the book and try to flip through the dates, I was like, I'm just going to assume these things take place in different timelines. All of these three different parts. Obviously, the part where we're talking about what Ruth used to ask her dad obviously takes place in the like furthest past. And the part where she's dealing with the relationship happens she moves back in the home. So obviously, it's like near past. And then our essential present is when Ruth is living with her parents. You see? So that was a little bit confusing for me. Not really, but like it was very unnecessarily complicated for no reason. I feel like we could have done so much without that ming-mang that was happening there. So not a fan of that. It was a very quirky story. It was a very, very quirky story. And the reason it was quirky was because the family is trying to figure out ways to essentially slow down the loss of their dad, in terms of like him losing his mind. They had these like really, really random facts about jellyfish pots. We also talk about different types of food. There were like mice experiments. Why do we need that? I don't think we needed that. So not a fan of that. And I don't know. It was a heartfelt story because in the background of the story, we're trying to follow the story about this man who's about to lose his actual mind, because he's going to lose his memories. He's going to lose all his behavioral patterns and who he is, his entire identity. He's about to lose all of that. And at the same time, we're getting little quips about like questions a child used to ask her dad. Yeah, I don't think it landed. I don't think that type of humor lands with me really well. Or maybe it wasn't written well. I'm not too sure, but like that's what I got from it, and I wasn't too happy about that. So if you do get to read this, let me know if you would enjoy it. It's like 200 pages. It's what I would consider a semi-short novel, so you can get through it really, really quickly. I did. I think it took me like 4 hours to get through, so yeah. Give it a try if you want to give it a try. I was just a little bit like unsure about like the timeline, as well as like the writing style, the structure. So the next book on our list is Hooked by Asako Yuzuki. I love a Japanese author. Like, Japanese authors do really, really good stuff. Fun fact, I'm learning Japanese, but not to make any sort of conversation, just to learn it because I can, right? So When I came across this book, I was very intrigued. The first time I came across this book was at a bookstore. I don't buy physical copy books because I don't reread a lot of books, and I think it would be a waste if I bought and I just never read it again after the first time I read it. So I was like, no, I see you, I will buy you on my phone. So that's what I did. So I bought the book on my phone and I had a great time. The story is a 400-page of insane character study. We do sociology in so many ways with this book that I think it should be required reading because it's just that good. I like it. I like it. I like it. I like it. If you haven't noticed, I actually like the story. So the story is about two lonely women living in Japan who are vastly different in appearance, but have very, very similar motivations in terms of like their socialization in life. And so that manifests in them wanting friendship from other women, but because of the way life has been structured for them, they kind of feel like they've not been able to do that because as adult women, it becomes very difficult to make friends, right? So the story follows two women, Eriko and Shoko. Eriko is a corporate Han, and on first glance, you would assume she would be the more well put together woman between the two, but she has a little bit of social ineptness and is not able to read social cues really, really well. She's one of those women who are really mean spirited, especially when they don't get the things that they want. So they essentially move towards things like blackmail, easy peasy. And you realize as you read the story, it's most likely because she's an only child. So they like lean into the only child stereotypes, but they don't like, it's not overt, right? They don't tell you it's because she's an only child, but the way she acts leans heavily on those stereotypes of only children, right? She's very possessive, and you kind of get a sense of the fact that this woman has not been able to make friends because she just doesn't know how to read social cues really, really well, and believes that people belong to other people. And that is simply because of the perception she has of friendships, and which isn't necessarily true, but you can make up anything. You can come up with any story in your own head about what you see and how you perceive it over and above what is actually happening. So it's that reality versus perception dichotomy that's happening in Eriko's head. And then we also have Shoko. Shoko is a housewife and a very lazy blogger, and is essentially the source of Eriko's affections throughout the book. So what you learn very, very early about Shoko is that she is a very insecure woman. So instead of trying to people please her way through life, she does the complete opposite and does what anybody on the opposite end of a people pleaser would do. She isolates. So she stays within her marriage and she doesn't have woman friends. She doesn't have friends in general, right? And then she does that weird thing that insecure women tend to do when they're on the opposite end of the spectrum of people pleasing. And she does that thing where she talks about how she is good at making friends with only men because men just find her cool. She's the cool girl stereotype in her mind. But as the story progresses, you realize how lonely and sad both of these women are. And when they meet initially, you're like, okay, let's see why these two women can't make friends with other women. And then, as I mentioned, Eriko, she's very possessive. She is those people who don't really understand that people don't just become friends off the bat, off rip, just because we met each other. We are friends, and because I've decided that you and I are friends, we're automatically friends. That's not necessarily the case, right? So that's why she can't make friends. The reason Shoko can't make friends is because at the tiniest inconvenience to her, like, guarded lifestyle, she like pushes back. There's a point where Shoko and her husband like leave the city to go visit her father, and Eriko, because she's very possessive, is calling and sends so many text messages that when Shoko comes back, she doesn't see it. Eriko decides, I'm going to her house just to make sure she's fine. oh, weird. And Shoko's like, that's a strange thing, and doesn't really talk to her about it, and doesn't tell Eriko, listen, dude, that was weird. You don't just like pop up to people's houses just because they haven't answered a few of your texts. So, and I don't owe you anything. She doesn't have that conversation. She just ghosts this lady, and Eriko goes absolutely nuts, right? So you realize that Shoko doesn't have the social grace, essentially. We'll call it grace. She doesn't have that social grace to essentially afford people certain conversations. I know we don't owe people like an explanation for why we essentially don't want to talk to them anymore. But given the fact that Shoko made it seem like she wanted to become friends with Eriko, even though Eriko was like, besties. She was like, besties. Sometimes a conversation like kind of gets through to people, not people like Eriko. Eriko's flipping nuts, right? But it's one of those types of situations, you know, she's just like out, which then leads to Shoko like blackmailing. She blackmails Shoko into becoming her friend because she realized Shoko is cheating on her husband. Because again, it's one of those I make really good friends with men type of thing. And then you realize, no, not really. They probably just want to rip your pants off. Half the time. All right. I'm not saying all the time, but like half the time they're trying to rip your pants off. So it's those types of social dynamics that were like going between with these two ladies. And I think the story was very, very interesting because more than anything, you would think that Eriko, because she has the money, she has the profession, she has everything on the outside that you would assume would make a person happy and fulfilled and full of joy about their life. You watch this poor woman not have any of that simply because she's insecure in a very, very dark way that she doesn't even understand. I feel like the only downside, or rather the few downsides of this book, is that we spend so much time like building on ideas or creating situations that we didn't really flesh out. One of the things that weren't really fleshed out was why Eriko feels the need to possess human beings in that way. Like I would say, like it's not overt that the reason why she acts the way she does is because she's an only child and she's been raised a certain way to believe that this is yours. I've bought you this, so it is yours. And because no one else, you don't need to share it with anyone else. It is yours. So you assume you accumulate things like that in life. So you accumulate people in the same manner, right? We don't really deconstruct that idea. We don't focus on why a person who has seemingly ordinary parents comes out the way she is, right? We don't explore that. We do, however, explore a lot of Shoko's background. So we have a better understanding of why Shoko is the lazy housewife blogger, which Eriko finds very, very appealing and doesn't feel perfect. So Eriko feels like, I can be friends with somebody like this. I can be friends with somebody who isn't necessarily perfect in every single way and presents herself that way. So we get to see why Shoko does all the things that she does. And we understand her upbringing. We understand that her father was very neglectful. He was a bad father. He didn't like hit her. He didn't do all your physical abuse type of stuff, but he emotionally wounded Shoko in such a way that she felt, you know what, I don't feel the need to accumulate people in the same way other people accumulate connection, right? And simply because it didn't look like something that it wasn't something that she was brought up to believe was important. She was brought up to believe that as long as you have breath in your lungs, you should be fine. Keep it moving. All this other stuff doesn't matter. Hence, things like cleaning weren't a priority in her home, so she doesn't clean in her new home, in her marriage home. She wasn't raised to believe things like human beings are meant to create connections with people around them who have more similarities, like your actual gender type of thing. So she wasn't brought up to believe those kinds of things. And so when she goes out into the world and she realizes the world actually functions a specific way, she kind of like isolates. So it's those kinds of things. We got a good sense of why Shoko was the way she was, but we didn't get the same sense with Eriko. And then we have a situation where we're watching the story like introduced a lot of themes. It introduces the idea of a person owning another person, but it doesn't like flesh it out entirely. So we have Ergo blackmailing Shoko because she sees Shoko cheating on her husband, right? After Shoko was like, bro, I don't want to talk to you ever, because you weird as hell and you shouted at me in public. So it's that kind of vibe. So what's her name? Ergo's like, okay, and still follows her blog, her tweets and stuff, and realizes that Shoko's at a aquarium. And so she goes to the aquarium just to see this woman that she's enamored with, like entirely enamored with. So what then happens is she blackmails the friend, my bestie. I'm gonna blackmail my bestie to become my bestie. Like there was like a disconnect in Eriko's head at times, and I was like, babe, you say this hand is your best friend, right? But you need to blackmail her to be your best friend. What are we talking about? Is my big question for the day. What are we talking about? Like crazy people. I've always been fascinated with like crazy people because it's like, how are you rationalizing this craziness outwardly? Like, how are you rationalizing it? Like, we all have like strange thoughts in our mind, but most of us are able to curb that urge to like react to every silly thought that we have, but they don't. Like, I don't get it. But I was very, very intrigued by how they talked about it in the book. But there was nothing explosive that happened with the blackmail. We don't have an explosive scene about her husband finding out she's cheating. But then I had to step back for a second and think about it. Like, in reality, some things just die out. Like, some situations just die out. Like, think about the time where you were in school and you didn't do well in a test and you thought, oh my gosh, my parents are going to have me for not doing well. Then you get home, you find your parents in the best of moods and they're like, you know what, you can try again next time. Like some things don't have a catastrophic, or it's a catastrophic. I think they aren't like explosive. They aren't like explosive endings to like storylines. Some things just die out because people have these realizations, and that's what happens in this book with the whole blackmail situation. You have Ergo realizing that this is not. I'm not the same person I was like when I met this girl. So expecting to cultivate and like create the memories we had from that first time we met is close to impossible, and then she just lets this girl go. Like sometimes things are just as simple as that. And then there's this other side plot. Oh, that side plot like had me like, I almost stopped reading the book because of the side plot. But I don't even talk about it. It pisses me off. Like it pisses me off, but it also went nowhere. Like there were themes introduced and they were like really, really interesting themes that I think all of us would be interested in reading, especially in like a psychological study, I guess. We'd all want to like think about those things, but they weren't like fleshed out entirely. But I think that is a testament to life in general. I don't know if this was her intention or if the author would be like, oh no, I did flesh it out in this way. I just didn't feel like it was fleshed out sufficiently. So I don't know. I was not a fan of that. But I think it's just a testament to life itself. Like life has a way of just like fizzling out certain essentially storylines in our lives. And if that was the intention, phenomenal. I think the story was pretty good. Pretty good. And I think it explores a lot of themes surrounding perception versus reality. And as people, we tend to have a very, very weird idea of how that is supposed to look like. And then reality kicks in and then it doesn't always look the same. So I don't know. I enjoyed that time that I spent in that book, and I found it very, very intriguing to follow two women who you would think were like completely different outwardly, having like very, very similar motivations, which is just being accepted in this world or accepting your version of reality the way you want it to be, and that being fine. But it isn't always the case, right? So I don't know. I enjoyed that. So the next book we're going to be talking about is Ghost Mountain. Ghost Mountain was strange, man. Like, it's one of those books that you don't really understand what the point of the story was and what the objectives of the story were. So what I mean by this, right? So in a romance novel, the objective is often two people getting together, and we essentially follow the story where we watch them fall in love and essentially live their lives together, right? That is the objective, to find these people in a relationship at the end of the story, if it is a happily ever after type of situation. And in those situations where it's not necessarily happily ever after, like, we watch their romance. The objective is the love story. In this particular story, we don't actually have like a set story, but a set object that ties all of these stories together. What happens in the story is that a mountain appears out of nowhere in the story. And the reason why it is essentially discovered is because a woman who walks there every day walks and realizes she's going higher and higher than she's usually gone. And she can see further than she usually sees. And she can see buildings that she's not often able to see on that particular walk. And then she discovers that, hey, I think I just climbed on a mountain. And because the phenomenon of mountains are like weird, and I don't have the time to go and like understand how mountains are formed, it just seems like one day it wasn't there and the next day it was. Like, you know, your scientists will be like, but. I don't know. I don't care to find out. But that's essentially the central, I guess it's going to be the central theme of the story. So the lady who discovers this mountain, she loses her dog, and that is because she's like trying to figure out, wait, how am I like elevating in this place that I've never actually elevated in? And she loses track of her dog, who swallows a basketball and essentially chokes to death. That's how the dog, like, it was sad. It was really, really sad. And then afterwards, she tells people in the town about it, and then we meet all the other characters in the town. The story is separated into three parts. The first, essentially, they call it book 1, book 2, book 3. So book 1 is about discovering the mountain and everybody's experience with the mountain. The lady who discovered the mountain is really, really upset with the discovery of this mountain because she loses her dog because of the mountain. There's somebody called the town drunk. The town drunk in the situation is just somebody who gets tied into folklore within the town all the time because he has a way of like being inserted into the story. There's a story where he's always throwing bricks into like police station. So he keeps throwing like rocks into the windows of the police station with a note on it, and then he goes to jail because at that point in the story he has nothing to live for. He's a 50-year-old man who's just waiting to die after drinking as much as he has. Then we meet also a couple. One of the people is Ruth and the other one is Otto. The reason I remember his name as Otto is because there's a point in book 2 where he keeps saying Otto. So the story with Ruth and Otto is basically the idea around old souls and young souls. Their story is boring, but it kind of like feeds into book 2. It's what pushes the story into what happens in book 2. And then they're a regular couple. And then who else is important in the story? Oh, there's the guy, the maps guy, like the map surveyor of some sort. And he's the guy who is essentially drawing the mountain onto the town maps going forward. And he does a presentation, and after his presentation, he has a really good time. It's one of those people who don't really get like a lot of attention from other people in their profession. So when they have like this huge discovery and people are very excited to talk to them about it, they take it too far, they get drunk. And then he meets this lady he's married. He's a married man, mind you. He meets this lady in the elevator, and the lady in the elevator is very gorgeous, and he doesn't sleep with her, and he makes it a point to tell us that he doesn't sleep with her. And like, okay, that's what you're supposed to do, married man, that's what you're supposed to do. And he tells his wife that I'm the kind of guy who's, even with the attention, I didn't sleep with her. His wife leaves him because it's like, why even thinking about such things type of vibe. So that was the story around there, that that those people, and I think I've covered all the people in book one. And then there's this whole story about the mountain and how, you know, when people like come across something new, they kind of make up stories. They say the mountain was made by Satanists and whatnot, and then the Satanists is just regular people who like to like congregate around new things. So in this case, it's the mountain. These people come and they just want to sleep around the mountain. They just like to be around the mountain because this is such a cool phenomenon. In my lifetime, a mountain like erected itself out of nothing, out of nowhere, right? So they are fascinated by this thing. So they start sleeping there. And Ruth, Otto's wife, starts being one of the people who sleeps there. And as with all communal situations, people always want to put together food, parties, and whatnot. They pick up some berries and like different vegetation around the mountain, and they eat it, and then because they die, they call Satanists because people think that they were a sacrifice for the father down there. So it was strange. It was really strange. It was really strange. And then we move into book two. Book two is just basically Otto telling us that he's really sad that his wife died, and he essentially kills himself. As he kills himself, he gets a child to help him. But the child doesn't do it deliberately. I don't think the child understands what he's doing. The child's name is Christopher, and basically Otto like covers his body with like rocks just so that he doesn't move and stuff. And then the child comes and covers Otto's face, and so he can't breathe, and then he dies like that. Weird. So the child's name is Chris. He goes to school with the town drunk and the lady who lost her dog in book one's child named Elsie or something. So the story around those people, like there's so many stories, like, and I'm like, why are we doing this story? Why are we having this story? Why is the story taking place? There's no reason. There's really no reason for the story to take place. But I'm just like enamored by the way we're just moving from story to story, people to people. And it's written in third person perspective. So we have a good sense. We don't feel like we are dying when Otto's wife dies or when Otto dies. We don't feel that feeling. We feel like creepy observers in this little town that has this mountain, right? So I think book three is basically just life with a mountain. People live near a mountain and nothing special is happening the entire time. I'm like, what are we doing here? Why are we here? What is the objective? But then again, a testament to life. Some things are just happening because they happen. For instance, my mom this morning went to church. Why? She just wanted to go to church. She wanted to commune with people who have the same religious beliefs with her. That's it. There's no big reason behind it. There's just life. And I was like, I think I might be on a generational run of really crazy coincidences about life just happening. Like, there's no big thing that is happening to people. Regular people on a regular Tuesday aren't doing big things. It's just life. And I think that was my big takeaway from all three of these books. There's nothing special about Ghost Mountain other than the fact that we discuss human beings being human beings in life, living life. And sometimes we want like all these big things to be happening, but you're not getting a promotion every day. You're not winning the lotto every day. You're not finding millions of great books every day. You're just coursing through life day after day after day. After 7 of those days, a week passes, then a month, then years. It's just life. And I think, I don't know, do I like books like that where nothing phenomenal is happening? Maybe. Because I sat back when I was writing the notes for this book and I was like, I'm not against stories that talk about human beings living ordinary lives. Because I think we live in a world where things have been touted as being, I guess, to an extent, grandiose. And big things are always happening. People are going viral. People are doing... There's so many people in this world. Big things aren't happening to every single person. Sometimes it feels like it individually, like big things are happening to you, but not every day. Not every day. And I think the mundane of life in these stories like just reminded me of that. In as much as these are not like your world-renowned type of novels, they're really good books. Goodbye, Vitamin. It's simply about this girl going back home, helping her dad live his day-to-day life. Hooked is about women who want to be friends and realizing why they can't be friends, or telling me why they can't be friends. Ghost Mountain is about a mountain that just magically appears and essentially affects the people's lives, and also doesn't affect these people's lives at the same time, because a mountain is an animate object that does absolutely nothing but. And I think sometimes we forget that. We forget that when we read like these explosive romance novels where big things are happening to our main characters. We forget that. In a thriller, we're trying to solve a mystery. Life is not about like a lot of mysteries. What mystery are you solving today? What romance are you going through today? Sometimes nothing. Sometimes you're just enjoying your day-to-day mundane life, or not enjoying it. That's okay too. I don't know. This is something that I think is very, very important. I think this is probably my favorite video that I've made so far, because I've had thoughts about all these different books, but I think it all culminates to, it's a book about life. You live life. Sometimes it's just a mundane set of seconds piled into minutes, into hours, into days, into weeks, into months, into years. It's just that. And that's okay. I think that's okay. And I enjoy that. Am I going to search out more books like this? No, because I think these books often find me. I don't know how, but like they often find me. And once I like lean into them, I have such a great time. I don't know. I enjoyed this. If you enjoyed hanging out with me talking about these really, really random ass books, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video with like different people that you think might enjoy books. Full stop. Not like these books, but like books in general. Yeah. Comment what weird and wonderful books you've read that like were just books about life and people living life. I'd like to read more of those. I don't know. Am I branching out again? I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, thanks guys for joining me. And yeah, okay, bye. We put this at the end of the video. We need to do like a blooper reel. Because Mountain was strange. Ugh. Okay, loses her dog that day. I'm not laughing. The police station. What the hell is a police station?